I'm Sean Kennedy, and this is Backstage at the Enharmonic. My guest today is famed percussionist and composer, Anthony J. Cirone. We talk about Mr. Cirone's upbringing in New Jersey, his acceptance to Juilliard, and ultimately him getting his job with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. We also explore the inspiration and the method by which he composed his landmark book, Portraits in Rhythm. Portraits in Rhythm are 50 etudes for solo snare drum. For anyone who has ever studied percussion, this book has been a challenge and an inspiration. We also discuss what it was like in the section at the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra during his tenure, the audition process for becoming a classical percussionist in a major symphony orchestra. Never one to remain still, he also discusses a lot of his new projects that are coming out. I hope you enjoy this edition of Backstage at the Enharmonic, featuring Anthony J. Cirone.
Can you hear me?
Hey, I got you. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yep.
Hey, thanks so much, man.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to get on. Followed a few instructions there.
Yeah. I have all my questions written out, so it's kind of like a set list in a jazz gig, though. So if we go somewhere else, that's fine.
Sounds great. Love to talk about percussion.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so you're from Jersey originally, right?
Yes.
Nice. Okay. Now, when you were coming up, what was the thing that got you involved with music as a young person?
Well, the story goes, my mother thought I should play an instrument. Nobody in my family played instruments. She had 11 brothers and sisters. Maybe there was an accordion player in there or two, but not really. So she took me to a music studio, and she says, "What do you want to play?" And I ran over to the drum set, and that was the story.
That's it.
That was it. I ran to the drum set. So she found me a drum set teacher, and I got a rubber pad, and I was 7 years old. And I started learning to play the drums on my little rubber pad.
Wow. And the rest is history, I guess they say,
Well, I kept going through school, grade school, and then I got into bands. Of course, we all had bands in school those days. And kept getting encouraged, had different teachers along the way. And but the other, I would say, milestone, when you get these breaks, I was a junior in high school, and a new band director we had was in Lyndhurst High School. And my band director said, "I have this friend who just got out of the Marine band or the Army band, and he's a drummer and he wants to get some more students." So he told me about him. So you should take lessons from him. So I did. Well, what I didn't know about him is that he was a Juilliard graduate. So what did he do as a junior in high school? Was preparing me to go to Juilliard, which I knew nothing about.
Wow.
So, and then I auditioned, and I got in a course and studied with Saul Goodman. And it's because of him that I really got a job in the business. Mm-hmm. He was really important. Conductors knew him very well, and they would call him when they had openings, and he would he'd always say, "I got the perfect person for you." He'd tell everybody that. And sort of the next guy on the list, he'd recommend. Kind of strange, but you get breaks in life, and those were a few breaks I got.
Wow, that's great. So you got that pad when you were little. When did you start getting into some melodic training? Was that in conjunction with the pad, or was that later?
No, that was much later in high school. I started playing the vibes. And then I was playing with a little group, piano, bass, and drums, and I would take my vibes along, and play a few tunes. I really wasn't a jazz player, with all that talent of playing jazz, but I could read and I could play the tunes, and the chords. So that's where I got into the mallet stuff.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
If you had like a takeaway from studying with Goodman, what would it be? Like something that's stuck in your head and you can always saying it.
Yeah. First of all, it was filled with cigar smoke. He smoked a cigar, and you walk in that room, it's filled with cigar smoke. We all survived it somehow. The second of all, we learned everything. Learned everything about music on the timpani. He wanted us to play the repertoire of the great symphonies on timpani, right? Excuse me a minute. So anyway, and he would be the kind of guy, he'd be sitting there putting the recording on, we'd be playing, and he says, "Give me those sticks." He comes over, pushes you out of the way. this is how you do it. And he'd play it. And we would learn by watching them, and of course, and he had all the energy and the character that the music's supposed to show. And so it was quite amazing. But we did also mallets and snare drum, but he mostly wanted to work on the timpani parts. And that's what we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Now let's start talking about Portraits in Rhythm, which was my first introduction to you, your name, that is, because I got the book in the mid-'80s. My teacher's like, learn these things, and I'm still practicing them. Every time I go back, it's like, oh, really? That was there? So that's what I really like about them, because when you think you know it, and then you go back to it years later, you notice something new, which is really beautiful about it. So you started it when you were an undergrad, yes? You started writing them then?
Yeah, I was about in my 5th of 6 years in Juilliard. And, going to Juilliard, I had no classical background. And now studying all this classical music was all new to me. All these composers, we studied and analyzed how they wrote and the way they used their chords and harmonies. And this was all new. And it was fascinating to me because thinking of what I've been doing, I've been playing snare drum parts, no melodic, just rhythms. I could play the rhythms. I could sight read the rhythms. But of course, this was so different. And what I learned about music is the forms they write in. Introduction, first theme, transition, second theme, coda at the end. There's like a pattern to most of their music. And also, I think listening to the rhythms that they use, of course, stuck in my head. And I'm thinking, boy, look at all these musical directives. We maybe had a forte and possibly an allegro, and that would have been it. We didn't have crescendo, decrescendo, retard, fermatas. It wasn't in our music. It was mostly based on the rudimental type of playing. And so I got interested in writing for the snare drum using these musical techniques, using these, not only the forms, but allegro maestoso, something like that, the character. I mean, I wrote a largo for a snare drum. I don't think anybody ever wrote a largo for snare drum,
Right.
I was marching tempo, and that was about it. So that's what got me interested, and I began writing, and I got down to 50 of them, and I realized I had a book here.
So the order that they're in the book, is that the order you composed them in?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh.
But I had a format. I put a bunch of time signatures. I think I had about 13 time signatures. So I wouldn't repeat one till I finished, and then I started repeating them.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and if you don't realize it, but the book's in 3 sections, which I don't know if I actually intended that. But the first, I think, 24 are etudes for snare drum with the forms I just said. Then I started using the titles ABA, Song and Trio, Sonata, and all that. And then the end of the book, the third part is similar to the first, but they're a little more difficult, I think, in the end of the book. So that was a form, it was sort of a pattern I had writing it.
Do you still have the original manuscripts in your records?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, I have the original handwritten stuff that I did in those days. Yeah.
Wow. That'd be cool to see it at some point. It'd be nice. When you were doing this, did you give them to anyone for feedback, or was this just totally your own thing and you hope to get it published? It was like a secret.
Well, I would bring him into Goodman. I'd ask him if I could play some of my etudes for him. He had never heard them, of course. And he was very encouraging. Goodman never talked much about technique. We played how we played. We watched him, and that's how we learned how to play. But of course, he was big on the musical directives. How do you make a retard? In the fermata, what do you do? So my book was full of that, and so he helped a lot with me in understanding how to play those musical interpretations. Those directives that are in the music. That was a big help.
Did his comments change anything for any of them, or did he just kind of go, "That's great, keep doing it"? Or
yeah, he didn't particularly say much about the rhythms about it. I mean, he didn't comment on that. It was just maybe the musical ideas within it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thinking back to the 60s when you were doing this, did you have any idea that this book would be such a landmark and a pillar in percussion pedagogy?
Well, no, of course, I had not published anything. And I wrote this while I was still in Juilliard, and I did take, orchestration classes and theory and harmony classes. So I knew all about this. But No, I had no idea. I just wrote these pieces, and and I realized they were nothing like what I was studying all those years. You know, our snare drum books were very simple rhythmic books. We didn't have a lot of mixed meter, you know, and even 5/4 or 6/4. We had 4/4, 3/4, 2/4, and 6/8, and that's about what we had.
Right.
So I, of course, was interested in doing more of what I was hearing at school, you know, with the mixed meter, and that was all fascinating. And of course, I incorporated all that in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was it tough to get it published? Like, what was that journey like?
Well, that is a miracle in itself. So here I am. I was about 4 or 5 or something. I got my manuscript, my handwritten manuscript in my hand. And what did I call it? I called it, I called it Portraits in Rhythm. That's what I thought of the title. And so the first thing I did was bring it to Chapel Music because they published Goodman and Goldenberg's books, my teachers there. And I just walked into the place. I didn't have an appointment or asked to see anybody in particular. And I'm sitting there showing my book. And the guy looked through it. I don't remember too many details. And he said, it looks nice, but we have Goodman and Goldenberg. We don't want to add any more percussion books. So I walked out. I walked out of that. Then I went to Paul Price, who had a store in New York, a musical store in New York. He was a composer, and he was composing a lot of the contemporary percussion things that were going on. And he liked the book too. And he says, but it'll take me about 5 years before I can get into it. Well, when you're 24, 5 years is like another lifetime. So I walked out of there. And then I walked into Henry Adler's studio, which I knew. I had taken some vibe lessons down there during my time in Juilliard. And Henry Adler was publishing his teacher's books. You know, I realized that. And so I showed it to him, and he liked it. And he said he'd publish it. And he said, write me a little thing about each one. That's the old book has the words on the top, you know. And so I did that, and I handed him the book, and he gave me a contract in 2 years, a 2-year contract to publish the book.
Wow.
Well, in the meantime, I got my job in San Francisco, and I moved to the West Coast. And, you know, I still didn't hear from him at that time. It wasn't that long. But all of a sudden, I get in the mail my book. Sorry about that. I get my book in the mail, and it's published by Bellwin Mills. I said, who that's Bellwin Mills? I didn't know who Bellwin Mills was. I thought I was getting Henry Adler's, you know. Well, I called Henry. So what happened in the interim of those months? Bellwin Mills bought out his publications, all his drum publications. So now I'm with the biggest music educator in the country.
And you didn't even know it.
I didn't even know it. So they published the book, and they had, in those days, this new issue, what they use this new issue when you have a new book. And in a week, that book was in 400 stores over the country, because that's what they did. They new issued the book. And it basically, you know, I wasn't nothing and nobody. It's not that anybody knew my name on it, but of course the book caught on because it was so different from what we had on the market, and it did it on its own, you know. So that was another break, getting with Henry Adler.
You have any idea how many have sold since then?
Well, I can estimate it because I know over the years it was selling about 5,000 copies a year.
Wow.
Which for us, that's a lot. No, that's a big number, you know. So when did it get published? I would say 59, 64, 63 or 64, 65, like that. No, 65, because I moved to the West Coast. So from 65 to 2000 or whatever, times 5, you got a couple 100,000 books in there.
Incredible. Incredible.
Well, you know, so I think, wow, this is easy. I want to write some more books. And nothing ever caught on like that.
Right. Yeah. Lightning doesn't strike twice, I guess.
Yeah.
That's great,
Right.
though. So
Yeah.
I've written some stuff over the years, and I revisit it. Has this issue ever come up with you in the Portraits in Rhythm? Did you ever look at it and go, maybe that measure should have been this, or should I like? How did you walk away and just go, that's it, I'm done? Like, how did you close the chapter on not refining it anymore?
Well, the thing about that, of course, I wrote thematically. So I wrote and I had a theme, 8 measures or so. And then I would do like a development of the theme. I'd rework it, add flams or something. So I always had a method of what the piece was going to be like. I didn't question that so much. And the rhythms, I mean, this is now 2 weeks ago. Okay. I'm looking at, well, actually, this is in, I don't know if you know about my advanced edition of Portraits in Rhythm.
Yeah, I got that one. Yeah, I just got it. Yeah.
So I'm teaching this. I still have some students. I'm teaching it, and there's a measure that's not right. And so I'm looking at that. Well, it was in a 5/4 time. Well, there was 6 beats in that measure. I never saw that before. But what I realized is that was correct in the original book. But when I transcribed them for the new book, I made a mistake, and that was the mistake. But there's been mistakes. I mean, proofreading your own material is really tricky because you know what it's supposed to be, and your mind doesn't always see what it's looking at.
Yeah.
And I've had to correct things over the years. Matter of fact, when Bellman Mills published it, I didn't get to edit it at all, and they were using my manuscripts. They probably could hardly read. I wasn't a very good manuscript writer, and so there were many, many mistakes. So they let me edit the book then at that time after it was actually published.
Wow.
So, mystery was a mystery. It was so new to me, You learn on the job.
Have you, you started with pen and paper. Have you ever gone into the computer thing with Finale or Sibelius or any of that technology?
Oh, yeah. I taught at Stanford for a few years in California. And one of the composers that taught there was developing score. That's one, it's called Score. Now it's used by most of the big publishers. And so he took me up and showed me how it all worked, So I got the early version of the program, and I've been using that forever. And all my books that I published, all are on Score.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm pretty advanced on that, but I'm not a real techie on the computer.
Okay.
Per se, but I know that program.
Yeah, you know the right tool to get the job done.
Yeah.
So when you got the job out in San Francisco, was this the type of gig you were hoping for after completing your studies at Juilliard, or were you hoping for something else or something different?
No, there's no question about studying with Saul Goodman. I studied with him for 6 years, and at that time, you were preparing to be in a major orchestra. Okay. I mean, that's what that was all about, that studio. We all didn't get there, of course, but many of us did. And there's a story how I got it. I'll tell you my story.
Right.
Goodman comes up to me, had a piece of paper in his hand, and he says, Joseph Cripps, who is the conductor of the San Francisco Symphony, is in town conducting the Philharmonic this week. He needs a percussionist. Here, go down to meet him at his apartment in Manhattan. This was not a do you want to question. So I go down to New York. At the time, he expected me, I was coming, and big German guy. He opens the door. And I'm standing, and he says, so you want to play in the San Francisco Symphony? I'm shaking in my boots there. Yes, maestro. He shakes my hand. Well, shakes my hand, shuts the door. That was it. 2 weeks later, I had a contract in the mail. Wow. So it was all Saul Goodman. I mean, they knew him, and he taught in Juilliard, and they trusted him to send them the right people. He sent Joseph Cripps his stipend, Roland Koloff. 5 years before this. So, Goodman came back, Cripps came back to him for his percussionist. Wow. So there's the breaks you get in life. My gosh, who knows? If that didn't happen, I don't know. I mean, I took many auditions. I auditioned for, it was Baltimore and even the Boston. I auditioned for them over the years before this happened. Cincinnati. That's what we were doing. We were taking auditions, and doing our best and getting experience. Mm-hmm. So that's what it was all about with Goodman, yeah.
What was the vibe like in the section when you went out there? Was it just strictly professional? Was it like, did you hang out outside of the gig? Like, what was it like with the other percussionists in the section?
Well, of course, Roland Koloff came from Goodman's. He came from the same place I came from, the same school. We knew Goodman. He became my best friend, because I didn't have any friends there. We got along really well together and our families. And he was a timpanist, and he was, in a sense, the section leader. There was no principal percussionist then. and the other people, Lloyd Davis was there. He was playing many years. And Peggy Lucchese, we had a woman in the orchestra, which was quite unusual in those years. But San Francisco had its share of women. I think they started earlier. There's a story in that you might be interested in. Yeah. Taking an audition. The committee is behind the screen in the hall. So they can't see the stage or who's on the stage, but it's there. You're in the hall in the few rows there. Well, they noticed it was very easy to when it was a woman walking on stage because of the shoes they wore. So, right. They felt they were being discriminated against. So they had to stop wearing shoes. So they had the women then not wear any shoes and walk on the stage without. But the women didn't feel comfortable without the shoes on because that's not how they played. Well, eventually they had to put a rug on the stage, and now everybody walked on the rug, and that settled it. Everybody was happy at that time.
Oh, that's great! It muffled everyone's footsteps.
That's right. No, can't tell who's up there now. That's good.
With the lack of principal at that point, how were assignments given out?
Yeah, Roland sort of did that, but the section had a way it was set up. Peggy played the bass drum mainly. I mean, you do this in your sections. You usually fall in the snare drum, bass drum, cymbals, and accessories and keyboards. So sometimes the principal comes in as a keyboard player. And Roland asked me, if I had my choice, what I'd like to do. I said, I'd like to do the keyboard parts, So that's what I did when I started. Lloyd played the snare drum, Peggy played the bass drum, and Joe Sinai played the cymbals. That was the section. And Joe was, he was fairly old at that time. He was retiring. I sort of got his position. He retired out, but still played extra. And we became good friends. And Joe, he was the old school, he took you under his wing, he'd help you out. He'd help me out, tell me about things, He was trying to be a big help. So Roland was a good friend. So we got together, the three of us, kind of for lunches and stuff quite often. And we all became very good friends. And actually, when Joe retired, I got the symphony to buy his collection of cymbals, which was amazing. Wow. He had all the old K Zillions, they started making them. And so that's the ones I used. I was doing the mallets. And then when Jack Van Geen came in the orchestra, he was one of my former students. He was a great mallet player. So he started doing the mallets. I started doing the snare drum. And, I wound up doing all the sections. Then later I did the cymbals for many years. So, you just work in the section, and we always worked it out, and everybody was happy doing what they did.
Nice. Great. Yeah. So what are you involved with these days? You said you're teaching some students. What other stuff do you have going on musically or non-musically?
Well, I'm still involved in publishing. So my latest endeavors, which the book, I can show you the cover.
Great.
This is one book that I just finished.
I think I got an email about that yesterday or something, maybe. I forget.
Okay, Bach for solo marimba. Okay. Actually, this is the music of Bach, his 25 of his sonatas and partitas arranged for marimba. Now, the woman who edited this, or they weren't her pieces, she edited them, Tammy Chen, was a former student of mine that I didn't know, but was living in the area, and she had a marimba school. So she would teach all these pieces, and she said to me, every time I teach the Bach piece, I got to go put in all my markings, my phrasings and everything, because Bach didn't do much in the music. He didn't tell you a lot what to do. It was noted, if you're living then, you knew how to play Baroque music. That was sort of what you knew. So Bach didn't do that. So to play for marimba for us, it had to have all her interpretations in there. So she said, I have to do this one a lot. Can you engrave this piece for me? So I did. I forget which one it was, but I wrote it out as a marimba part. And I said, Tammy, we should make a book out of this. So we wound up doing 25 of them and put it in a book. And the thing about it, now we can talk a little bit about portraits and rhythm. What what the students don't realize, percussion students, now today at marimba is the big thing, you know. Before it was timpani and snare drum, and we played xylophone and only the orchestral parts. Now it's solo marimba is a big thing. But, you know, when they write for solo marimba today, the composers do use phrasing, like they would do it if they were writing for an orchestral instrument. And so, but that's what we never got on snare drum. Nobody ever put a phrase over any lines of snare drum music. We just never saw that. And I never did it when I wrote my book either. But I realized after many years of playing that, there's a certain way I play these etudes. There's a certain way I phrase these. It's my own personal interpretation, which is what music's all about. I mean, you know, conductors, they'll conduct this symphony, and another conductor will conduct that symphony, but they're not exactly the same. So that's why I did the advanced edition. So I have in there my idea of how to phrase those pieces. It could be done other ways, but that's the suggestion. The other thing we're not good at in percussionists is knowing all the Italian terms. Now, the first one in portraits and rhythm is allegro assai. Now, whenever I give a clinic, I'm talking about portraits here. The first thing I ask is, how many people know what the word assai means? And usually nobody raises their hand. Allegro, they know. We get the idea what allegro is. But they don't bother to look up the character word. You know, like allegro maestoso, allegro grandioso. I used a lot of these in the book. And that's the character of the piece. So I say, okay, it means very. So very allegro, which allegro sort of means animated also. It's not just a tempo mark, it's like animated. So very animated, so a little faster than normal. Use some little, you know, interesting things when you play it. Don't just keep it straight like a machine gun, right?
Right.
And so we go through all of that. It's like, what is number 3 is allegro maestoso. So I asked them from teaching that, do they know what maestoso means? Some people do, and some don't. You know, they're young yet, these kids. And so it means majestic. Now the question is, what do you do to make that sound majestic? Well, this takes a little bit of thinking. You know, if you had to tell a student, do this or that, do I go faster? Do I go slower, louder, softer? What do you do? And that's the whole idea. And they have to come up with, you know, something in their mind that describes what makes music majestic. And so if you think of the word, I think of the word as like entrance of the king, you know, that would be majestic. So in the new version of my book, I put a tenuto over the first, after that little introduction, the first measure or so, I put a tenuto over every note. So instead of just playing dum dum da dum dum da dum, it's dum dum da dum dum da dum. That would be more majestic.
Yeah.
And now we can go through the whole book and talk about most of those, you know, tempo markings that I put down as a composer. And then there's other words that we find out in the score. In number 5, I use a morendo. Okay, what does morendo mean? You know, if you don't study Italian and you haven't played in an orchestra, you don't see these terms, but they don't bother to look them up.
Right. And
that's why I wrote my Cirone's Pocket Dictionary of foreign percussion terms, because they needed a book to look these words up particular for them. Well, okay, it means dying away. So now tell me, what do you do to make the music die away? And they come up and say, well, I guess you could get slower. That's correct. But then I could use a retard for that. Oh, yeah, and you can get softer. I can use a diminuendo for that. But a morendo is both getting softer and slower.
Mm-hmm. And
depending how dramatic you make that is a great character in the piece. You could just go, and that slows down. Or you can go, you know, and a little body language. Yeah. It makes you, that's another thing about percussionists. They're like robots. You know, we can go like machine gun through all that rhythm, but they don't move their body. And I tell them, do you ever see a violinist play? Well, they're doing this and then doing that, and they go like this. And, you know, they're all over the place. and we stand there like robots. So I try to teach them, there's a subito pianissimo in one of my pages there. So I say, what does subito mean? Okay, they know it or they don't know it, but it means immediately. So immediately pianissimo. So then I tell them, okay, take the subito out. Now what do? Well, you play it pianissimo. So what do you do if it's subito? You come in early? You can't come in early. And, I've thought about this for years. There's no rhyme or reason to have a subito pianissimo as far as how it's played. You're loud, then you're soft. That's what you're doing. Well, I came up, it's body language. You have to do something with your body to show, this real fortissimo, and then you bend over.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's part of what I try to teach the kids to do, play with their body a little bit. It's like ending a piece, yum to get up. You're done. And they hold their hands like they're marching, but yum to get up, like
right.
that. That's character.
Yeah, it's over.
Yeah. And so that's all very important in doing the portraits. It's to show all the musical elements that are in there.
And I'm having a lot of fun because I'm recording them as a personal project. I'm doing one a week. And what I found is I have to use your latest edition and the other one that has all the prose, the write-ups you did for each one.
The write-up about it, yeah.
Neither one checks all the boxes for me. I need to look at this one and then note here, and then I can start to get my own interpretation after I have everything you've.
Right, and you should try to use your own thing, not just copy. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
that's the fun part about music, creating. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a strange question, but do you still enjoy listening to music?
I have so many CDs I've never opened. People send me CDs. I have over 120 published books and pieces. I've written all my life. I've loved to write. And that's what I spent my life doing, writing. And I as a job, I listened to music, 20 hours a week, rehearsals and concerts. That's all I did was listen to classical music. So I didn't go home and put on the stereos and listen to another classical piece of music. But I've had it all, but that's because of my job. You're always listening. I love to listen to a Mahler symphony, which we don't play most of it. Most of it's without, but just to listen to what's going on and how the conductor shapes the music for the orchestra. It taught me a lot of stuff about music.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then one last question: if you had any advice for young people watching this that want to go into the music field as a career, what advice could you give them?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. I was teaching university a total of 42 years, and most of the students that came to my studio usually were trained before they got there. In high school, they've been playing, and usually had the marching band experience. But I taught them, of course, all the classical approach to the instruments and playing in orchestras. And in a sense, I did what Saul Goodman did, train these students to play the great orchestral music. They had to play the timpani parts like I did. That was part of their lessons. And the snare drum excerpts and the xylophone excerpts, as they got up to seniors and graduate students, that's what I had them do. So they knew all about playing in an orchestra and what music you had to play. And they all, I think, had an idea that would be great. But there's not that many jobs for all the hundreds of percussionists that we turn out every year. And so it's something about, so what do you do when you graduate? You have a degree in music performance. And many of them had an education degree too. They were able to get a teaching job, and a lot of them went into teaching. But some of them became freelance players and subbing in this community orchestra and that one, staying in the business and then starting to take auditions around the country. But you think of an audition, a typical audition for a major orchestra. If there's one percussionist opening, there could be 300 applications sent in for that one job. So the committee has to read through them, we have a committee that does that, and extract about 60, if they can, of the best possibility, most experience and stuff. Out of those 60, then, they may send out a notice to record certain amount of music on a tape, record it, of this repertoire, the same repertoire. Then they listen to that. And out of the 60, they try to get maybe 30 people or 20 people to actually come to the hall to take the preliminary audition. Now, if you agree, you buy your plane ticket, you get your own hotel, you show up at the door when it's due. That's all up to you. So you do. You show up at the door, and you get maybe 10 minutes to run through the first audition. And you know what the repertoire is, and you're playing that for the committee, and they're taking notes. If you get 6 out of 10 votes positive, you move to the next audition. So that was the preliminary, and then they have a second preliminary. Now you're down to maybe 10 people. Okay. Now the 10 people come for the final of those auditions, or maybe out of those 10, you take 3 or 4 or 5, or whatever you think is the top players. And then the conductor shows up. He hasn't been there yet. So we're telling the conductor, we think these people are qualified to be in the orchestra. Now, there are many versions of how orchestras do this, and it's changed over the years. But at that point, the conductor gets to select 1, 2, or none of those people. If he wants 1 or 2 of them, or 3, he would have them within the next season come back and play a week with the orchestra with pay. They'll pay your way out when he's conducting or she's conducting, and you play the part. And so he can look at you playing in the orchestra. And he'll do that for the 3 or how many people he chose. Then at the end of that year, they take a vote, or the conductor. Sometimes you take a vote and the conductor has 200 points, you have 100 points. It's all different how you get to the end. But the conductor usually has an edge here. We wound up letting the conductor pick whoever he wanted because we said they qualify. Now he can pick either one, and that's what he does. And then you're hired for 2 years on probation. So the first year is when you took the audition. The second year is you came back and played. All these people had to play with the orchestra. The third year you're hired, and then you play for 2 years. So until 4 years have gone, you don't know you even have this job yet.
Wow.
And after the first year, you can be saying, thank you very much. Or the second year is to say, thank you very much. If they hire you for the third year, you have a job for life. It's a 10-year job for life.
Wow.
But that's pretty difficult to do. You think about all these people that are auditioning, they're all good people. It's really tough. And so I always tell the kids they have to have something besides just the music. And I encourage them to be a double major if they have any other interest. I mean, some are interested in science, some are interested in math, just get a second degree in that, or education or something. Mm-hmm. And some do, and some don't have any other interests. That's all they want to do. And they wind up either being freelance players or, playing in a smaller orchestra. And some have gotten big orchestras. A number of students have, the timpanists in the Boston Symphony is one of my students. And San Jose Symphony, of course, in our area has been my students. They're living right there. They played in that for years. And well, it goes on, but that's the business we're in. It's a tough business, and if you want to be successful, you have to really donate a lot of your life in the beginning here to preparing yourself to do that. Mm-hmm. It's tough.
Wow, that's great advice. You started so early. Would there have been any other field you would have been interested in, you think, if you didn't do music?
Yeah. So when I graduated high school, I didn't know if I was going to get into Juilliard and I thought, I'll go to Montclair State Teachers College. That's what I would have done. And I probably would have been a music teacher. But of course I didn't have to do that because I got into Juilliard and spent 6 years there. And there was no question what I was being trained for. And then having Goodman recommending, was perfect setup. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Got to get a few breaks in life.
Yeah.
And, you got to take them when you get them. Sometimes, if I didn't go study with this fellow from Passaic, go on the bus, I wouldn't have ever gotten to Juilliard, right? So
incredible.
Anyway, it's a great profession. There's nothing like making a living doing what you love to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's can't be anything much better than that.
Right.
Yeah. So let me tell you my latest project.
Okay, go ahead.
My latest project is for solo marimba. It's called Selections from the Greatest Music Ever Written. In other words, how many of these students are ever going to play a Mahler symphony, really? You know, most of the community orchestras don't play them, that level of the symphony. So they don't hear much of this music, and there's such great music out there. So I picked about, in my 8 or 10 pieces. Sometimes it's the whole movement, sometimes it's part of a movement. Like, for instance, the last one I'm doing is the Brahms Lullaby from his first symphony. Just that, and they arrange it for solo marimba.
Wow.
So they're playing this great music, which, you don't forget it. It's just, and so anyway, that's my project right now.
Oh, that's beautiful. I can't wait to see when that comes to fruition.
And if I don't think of another project, I'm going to get depressed. I've been doing all this all my years. Get up in the morning, I got to have a project, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Anyway, it's fun.
All right. Well, thank you for the decades of inspiration from your book and all the other publications also. And thanks for taking the time to do the interview. I really am honored to have had the chance to speak with you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for checking out this edition of Backstage at the Enharmonic. For more great interviews like this, please visit my website, www.seanjkennedy.com, and click the podcast tab. And in conjunction with this video, please jump over to my YouTube channel and check out my progress as I record all 50 of Mr. Cirone's etudes from his book, Portraits in Rhythm.